Hello, I'm Robert Hilke. Please call me Robert. Yobiste is fine. I'm from California, but those of you who have been to Europe before would notice that my family name is a German name. That's because I'm 100% Deutschke. But actually, I've been in Japan for most of my life. I've been here for many, many years. And in those many, many years, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to work with many very, very talented business people from around the world. And when those people, in my career as an intercultural consultant and a trainer, when those people are working inside of their own cultural bubble, there's no doubt that they are able to display their full ability at 100%. But how about those same people, especially if I'm really honest, especially talented Japanese business people? If they're working in a diverse environment where people have different languages, different backgrounds, different nationalities, different thinking, ways of thinking, in a sense, different joshiki about how to do things. Now, let me pause for just 1 second. I'm going to use the word joshiki today as if it were an English word. It's kind of like sushi. I mean, if you think about sushi and you try to muriyari put it into English, open face, rice, vinegar, fish sandwich, right? Right. Sushi is sushi, and kaizen is kaizen. And in the same way, joshiki is joshiki. So if everyone has the same joshiki, things are very, very smooth, right? But the problem comes when you're working in an environment where people have different joshiki about how to do things. In that situation, will that same talented business person be able to do his or her job at the same level? No, actually, definitely not, at least in the beginning. Her actual skill is at this level, but what she's able to display, at least initially, is only that level. You can see there's a gap between what she can show initially and what she can actually eventually be able to demonstrate. And that's a huge gap. And if we try to quantify that gap, so no gap was suruto, it's a really, really big cost for the organization if people can't do their job at 100%. Because many things can happen that are very, very confusing. Let me give you kind of gutai tekinare. How many of you have ever been in a meeting with people from the United States? A business meeting, teachers meeting, student meeting? I think many people have for sure, right? Okay. As a tendency, U.S. American people, their business meeting behavior tends to be very, very shy and hesitate to speak and worried about other people's reactions and don't want to express themselves in public. Is that your experience? No, of course not, right? Especially from a Japanese perspective, it's kind of アメリカ人は傾向として困るぐらい話すんですよね。でしょ？もう信じられない人の話はちゃんと最後まで聞いてくれない？割り込むな。The thing you're asking me about now, it's on my next PowerPoint slide. Just wait. How about Japanese people? Japanese people very, very quickly, 活発に、積極的に challenge other people's ideas assertively, aggressively in front of many people in a meeting? No, right? Does that mean Japanese people can't say their idea? Japanese people can't challenge other people's ideas? No, of course not. Of course people can, and of course they do. But it's a question of the timing. When do you do it? You probably don't do it in front of many people. But before the meeting, maybe after the meeting, shoninzu, maybe one-on-one, a kind of sodan nemawashi time. At that time, right, then you can speak very frankly. 人間関係さえあれば、上司の前でも端的に話すことできる。But probably as a tendency, you don't do it in front of many people, right? Okay, so let's try to map that tendency, okay? We need some kind of framework to be able to understand that. So let's imagine that we have a black and white scale. Now, the world is not black and white, of course, I understand. But for pedagogical purposes, 教授法のために、とりあえず白黒、ちょっと比べますね。Let's take a look at both the black and the white. At the white end of the scale, well, your joshiki for a business meeting is you go to the meeting and you listen carefully to what people say. You think deeply about what they said. And then you try to make a conscious decision. should I say my idea now? Should I wait until later? Should I just give up my idea? Or, yeah, 別に言わなくていい。どうせ岡本先輩が言ってくれるから。That's at the white end of the scale. But at the other end of the scale, your joshiki for a business meeting is you must speak. You have to. You have to. 給料泥棒ならないように you have to say your idea very, very assertively. You have to be comfortable if other people challenge your idea. You have to be comfortable to challenge other people's ideas. You go to the business meeting and ただ椅子を温めて空気を吸ってお茶を飲んで you don't say your idea assertively and aggressively in the meeting 無責任 it's not okay for the black end of the scale. Now let's introduce you to two people to try to make it a little bit more real. First person is Mr. Tanaka. Now Tanaka-san is a very, very typical business person, very, very talented. He graduated from a very, very good university, maybe like Toyohashi Gikadai, for example, right? His TOEIC score is kind of high 700, 750 or so. So English is not such a big problem for him. He can communicate in English. And his joshiki is very, very close to the white end of the scale. Now, Tanaka-san is working overseas now. He's the leader of a project team working in Munich, in Germany. And all of the team members, all of his buka, all the people that are under Tanaka-san are from European countries. Now let's imagine a very, very typical daihyo-tekina member of his team. This is Bettina. And Bettina is from Germany. Okay? Bettina's joshiki is very, very close to the black end of the scale. So what you can see is that there's a really, really big gap between Bettina's joshiki about the business meeting behavior and Tanaka-san's joshiki about business meeting behavior, right? And if we quantify that gap, if we put a number on it, it's really a big business cost because it's very frustrating for both people. Both people feel big frustration. And that big frustration translates into three negative ramifications. Mitsu no warui eikyo aru. First of all, people cannot do their job 100%. 自分の本当の能力 100% 発揮できない. The second thing is that you can't maximize the output for your team. And the third thing is from the organization's point of view, you can't maximize profit. 利益最大化も達成できない if you don't have good communication. So we need some kind of a framework to be able to notice these kind of gaps and measure the gaps. And this is what we call a map. Just like the famous interculturalist Erin Meyer, she uses maps, we also use maps. Maps of joshiki, maps of business communication, maps of culture. Now, if you think about a map, we use the map, the concept map as a kind of tatoe, as a kind of hiyu, as a metaphor. A map is a navigational tool. If you go someplace you've never been before and you have no map, now, of course, you can just start to walk around, and it could be very interesting. You can discover many things that you normally would not see, but it's not a very efficient way to navigate, right? The most efficient way, of course, is you have a map. But what's the most important information you get from the map, at least initially? Even if you can see the destination, if you don't have this, a map doesn't help you. Even if you see the roads which emanate from the destination or the arrow pointing north, what we need, first of all, the most important thing is genzaichi. Where are you now? If you don't know where you are now, the map is useless. However, if you do know where you are now, you can make a plan how to navigate to your destination in the most efficient and effective way. Ibunka communication is exactly the same thing. So if we think about the gap between Tanaka-san and Bettina, right? Well, if we use the maps, we can find some way to be able to close the gaps. Now, let's imagine that you are a business consultant, and Tanaka-san has called you on the phone and says, please help me. My team is wazawai. It's a disaster. You know, communication is really strange. Everybody's always interrupting in meetings. I can't control the meetings. And, you know, people are attacking other people in the meetings, and I feel really uncomfortable. And I think my team members must be really frustrated with the way that I manage the team as well. What could I do? And you give him some advice. Well, one thing, of course, you could advise Tanaka-san is, well, if Tanaka-san is the only person with his own joshiki in that situation, and everybody else has different joshiki, well, maybe Tanaka-san needs to just put on his big boy pants and he needs to be more assertive. He needs to say his idea. He has to be comfortable challenging other people's ideas, having his ideas challenged. In a sense, it's a kind of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Go ni ireba, go ni shitagai. Now, that idea of when in Rome, do as the Romans do, sometimes it's the best idea, right? I mean, for example, if you're in Germany, you have to follow German law. Even if you don't like the law, you have no choice. You must follow the law. But sometimes you know that your way is best. And in that situation, thinking just, go ni ireba, go ni shitagai dake dattara, seibone nashi desu ne. Nanka kurage mitai, just kind of floating around. You know that you have your own style, and you know that you have your organization backing you up. So sometimes the best way to do it is awasete morao. In other words, Tanaka-san tries to persuade Bettina to move to him. Now that takes more time, but it could be the best way to do it. For example, teleconference. Maybe you've had a teleconference before. Teleconferences are very, very difficult, even if it's your own native language, right? You have background noise, you have people talking at the same time. It's really hard to manage. Which is a better way to manage the teleconference? Bettina's style, itsudemo warikonde ii, say your idea, offer information, or Tanaka-san's bao matsu style. Of course, Tanaka-san's style would be better in that situation. Now, a third way, of course, is that you make a kind of hybrid, a kind of ayumiyotte, where both people talk together and they come up with the best solution for that situation. Now, there is a fourth way, but we don't recommend the fourth way. The fourth way is just tada no oteage. I give up. Mo katsuku. Nande aitsura kouyuu fu ni yatteru? Mo nankai mo setsumei shiteru zenzen wakatte kuren. And then what happens, to be honest, in that situation, is people with similar joshiki, katamaru, they get together because it's easy. Shojiki ni imasu to, taiyose mendokusai. Now don't misunderstand. Don't misunderstand. Okay, I am a huge fan, daikange, for taiyose. It's my life. It's what I do professionally. It's the most important thing, I think. But it's not so simple as just diversity and inclusion. Many companies' websites, you can see pictures of people from different backgrounds working on a project team, happy, smiling faces. It's a kind of, we are the world, like that, right? It's too simplistic. The key is diversity management. How do you manage that diversity to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction? Because if you don't manage it, people are moving off in different directions, and then it's very, very hard to be able to maximize profit if you don't have everybody moving in the same vector. Now, where does our joshiki come from? Let's think about Bettina's joshiki or Tanaka-san's joshiki. Where does it come from? Where do we learn our joshiki? How do we learn our culture? Is it DNA? Minna onaji suido nonderu kara? No, what it comes from mainly from education. In fact, kyoiku no mokuteki is to try to create shakaijin who can navigate smoothly in that particular cultural context, right? If you think about, kids in Japan, for example, you start hoikuen maybe 1 or 1.5 years old, you go to yochien, you go to shogakko, you go chugakko, then you go to high school, then you go to university, maybe even graduate school. Suimin jikan o nuite, we spend about half of our lives in school and school activities, right? And so when we become shakaijin, it's very natural that our joshiki should match our education as a tendency. So let's compare two educational systems. The first one, probably very familiar for most of you who were educated in Japan. You have the teacher, you have the students, and the teacher's job is to transfer information to the students in a one-way stream, right? It's very, very efficient. Same time, same place, same information. It's a kind of injection of information. It's very, very koritsugai. It works very, very well, right? But it doesn't mean that you can never challenge. It doesn't mean you can never ask a question. You probably don't do it in class. Sensei, chotto chigaun janai desu ka? But what you do is maybe yoji iko, right? 職員室に行って、トントン、あ、先生ちょっとよろしいですか? And then one-on-one, you can talk to the teacher. It's very much like a business person talking to her boss after the meeting finishes, right? That's where nemawashi comes from, right? But that's not the system that I grew up in. System I grew up in is like this, where of course the teacher gives information, but then the expectation is that people will challenge each other. And the reason why it's okay to challenge is because of a very important daizente. A person and a person's opinion are separate. A person and a person's opinion are separate. And that is tataki komareteru in us from a very, very early age. Person's idea must be kept separate. So you're not attacking me, you're simply attacking the idea. Now, what I did up until now was present kind of black and white, but the world is not black and white, of course not, right? There's many different behaviors, many different joshiki. But as a tendency, Tanaka-san is very typical for a Japanese member, very close to the high end of the scale. And Bettina, or typical Canadian person, would be very close to the lower end of the scale. But not everybody. Mochiron kojin-sa mo aru. Of course, there's individual variation. One of my coworkers, Patrick's from Canada, but he's very comfortable at a 7. Right? Very comfortable at doing that kind of style where you don't challenge other people, right? So the key here then, I should tell my own story. Actually, when I first came to Japan on this scale, I was a 1. I was a 1, absolutely, many years ago. 2から10、そのシステムの存在自体もout of 眼中ですね。ミーティング行って、座って YKK 着しなきゃいけない。It was really stressful for me. I really almost left Japan at that time. 日本に向いてない。I almost went back. I stayed, fortunately, because finally I was able to develop some concept by having these maps. These maps will be very, very useful in helping us to navigate inside of a global, diverse business environment, to give us the kind of objectivity we need in order to recognize what our own genzaiichi is, and then to be able to notice those gaps and then decide how to close the gaps. Do we adjust to other people? That's one way. It's very quick, right? Or do we explain to other people so that they understand? That's also an option. Or we create a hybrid. But having those maps as a framework will help us to navigate more successfully in today's global business environment. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk to you today.